Everyone in that family died without knowing what I knew. My name is Mary Whitaker, and for 20 years I worked for the Carvers, one of those old New York families people whispered about with admiration. They had money, influence, connections. They lived in a beautiful brownstone near Central Park, the kind of home people photograph during holiday walks to the world. The Carvers were perfect, refined, elegant, untouched by the ordinary struggles of life. But I learned something in that house. The prettier the surface, the darker the shadows beneath it. I began working for them in the spring of 1993. I was 24, with more hope than experience, grateful for a job that offered a room, steady pay, and the illusion of stability. Richard Carver was a respected surgeon, tall, polished, always controlled. He carried himself like a man who'd never been questioned in his life. His wife Eleanor was graceful and soft-spoken, but her smile rarely reached her eyes. She moved through the house like someone haunted by things she couldn't name. Their daughter Grace was 5 when I arrived. Curious, talkative, imaginative. She once told me the trees outside her window whispered secrets when the wind blew. And then there was baby Daniel, just 3 months old, a quiet child with dark eyes and a habit of gripping your finger like he never wanted to let go. From the outside, they looked like a storybook family. Inside, the cracks were already there. I just didn't know how deep. The first sign something was wrong came late at night. I was walking past Richard's study when I heard raised voices, low, tense. Eleanor said, "You promised me he'd never know." Richard replied, colder than the December air outside, "You should have thought about that before." A few seconds later, a door shut softly. Not slammed, closed carefully, like people who argue in practiced silence. I froze in the hallway, heart pounding, knowing I had stumbled onto something I wasn't meant to hear. Life in the brownstone went on, but the air inside felt heavier after that. Richard worked long hours, often coming home past midnight. Eleanor drifted through her days with a distant expression, her movements elegant but fragile. Grace sensed something wrong too. Children always do. And Daniel, sweet, quiet Daniel. He spent most of his time in the nursery at the top of the stairs. The night that changed everything was in December. Snow was falling outside, the kind that makes the whole city look peaceful, even magical. I was cleaning the kitchen when I smelled something faint but unmistakable. Smoke. Not the smell of cooking or burnt toast, but something sharper. Something wrong. I ran upstairs. When I reached the nursery, Eleanor was standing completely still, staring at the curtains as small flames crawled upward. The crib was right beside them. I shouted her name, but she didn't move. Her face was pale, empty, frozen. I grabbed a blanket, threw it over the flames, and smothered the fire, coughing as smoke filled the room. "Take him!" I yelled, pointing toward the crib. She didn't react. She didn't even blink. I lifted the baby myself, Daniel, warm and half asleep, and carried him into the hallway. When I looked back, Eleanor was still standing there, transfixed. The fire department came. They called it a minor incident. The next morning, the nursery was spotless, too clean, like the night before had never happened. The crib was empty. Eleanor sat alone in the living room, holding a silver rattle, staring at nothing. When I approached, she whispered, "You didn't see anything, Mary. Do you understand?" Her voice was so fragile, so broken, that I just nodded. But inside, questions burned hotter than the flames I had put out. A week later, the Carvers left the city for what Richard called privacy. When they returned, their world had changed. Richard looked older, Grace was quiet and withdrawn. Eleanor seemed hollow, like she had left some part of herself behind. And baby Daniel, they told me he had fallen ill on the trip. That complications happened, that he never recovered. There was a funeral. Small, controlled, closed casket. Eleanor didn't cry. Richard didn't either. And I watched them bury a child while remembering Eleanor standing frozen beside a burning crib. People in that world don't ask questions. Tragedy becomes a social inconvenience, something to acknowledge with a card, then move on from. I stayed with the Carvers because I didn't know what else to do. Grace needed stability. Eleanor slipped further away from herself. Richard became harder, sharper, more distant. Rooms of that brownstone went unused. The nursery door stayed shut for years. Time passed. Seasons changed. Grace grew up. I grew older. The city outside the brownstone evolved, but the house inside stayed trapped in whatever moment had shattered them. Sometimes, late at night, I thought I heard a baby cry behind the closed nursery door. But when I approached, the sound would vanish, leaving only silence and the creak of the stairs behind me. In the late 2000s, Eleanor's health began to decline. She grew thinner, weaker, her once perfect posture bending under the weight of something invisible. I became more than a housekeeper. I became her caretaker, the one who reminded her to eat, who combed her hair on bad days, who listened when she spoke in fragmented whispers. Sometimes she said things that kept me awake at night. "You were always kinder than I deserved." Or, "Mary, do you think we're forgiven for the things we hide from the people we love?" One afternoon, while vacuuming her room, the machine pulled something from under the dresser, a sealed, yellowed envelope with my name written on the front. I felt numb holding it. I didn't open it. Somehow I knew that whatever was inside would change the way I saw everything. I put it away and tried to forget it existed, but it haunted me just the same. A month later, when Eleanor was very weak, she asked to speak with me. She looked so small against the pillows, her once bright eyes dimmed but still searching. "Some secrets," she whispered, "are too heavy to carry into the grave." But she didn't tell me what the secret was. She just held my hand, sighed, and said, "I hope you understand someday." She passed away the next morning. After her funeral, the brownstone emptied quickly. Grace moved away. Richard buried himself in hospital work until a heart condition took him 2 years later. I stayed behind to help pack up the house. That's when I remembered the envelope. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. A young man, maybe 22, standing in Central Park in the late afternoon sun. Tall, strong, with a gentle smile and a face that looked unmistakably like Richard's. Same eyes, same expression, same presence. It felt like time stopped. On the back of the photo, in Eleanor's handwriting, were 5 words that nearly made me drop it. "For Mary. Thank you for saving him. Him, not Daniel. Him." The young man in the photo was the baby I had carried out of the nursery that night, the baby I had pulled from the smoke while Eleanor stood paralyzed, the baby everyone believed had died on that mysterious trip. Daniel hadn't died. He had been taken somewhere else, hidden, protected, maybe even given a new life, which meant the child they buried under Daniel's name wasn't him. The truth hit me like cold water. Eleanor hadn't lost her son. She had switched him for years after. I tried to understand why. Why such a drastic choice? Why the deception? Why bury one life and save another? The answers came slowly, through bits of conversation I remembered, things Eleanor said when she thought no one was listening, and something I learned about Richard. He had a brother, estranged and troubled, a man whose existence was kept out of society's view, a man who resurfaced briefly the year Daniel was born. Everything finally made sense. Eleanor had been hiding something long before the nursery incident, a secret that threatened the reputation, stability, and identity of her entire family, a truth that Richard could never know without destroying everything. So she protected her world the only way she could, by rewriting it. The more I learned, the more I realized how trapped she must have felt. Fear, shame, loyalty, love. Sometimes they mix together until right and wrong become impossible to tell apart. Everyone who could confirm the truth is gone now. The brownstone was sold, the furniture auctioned, the walls repainted, the secrets left behind, swallowed into the city noise like everything else, except the one I carry. Sometimes I take out the photograph, the young man in Central Park, smiling at a life he didn't even know he had escaped, and I wonder where he is now. Did he grow up happy? Did he ever sense something missing? Did he ever feel the pull of a truth just out of reach? Sometimes I think of Eleanor, the fear in her eyes that night, the guilt that devoured her for the rest of her life. I realize now that her silence was not cruelty, it was desperation. And sometimes I think about myself. Whether I should have spoken years ago, whether exposing the truth would have saved the family, or destroyed it faster. I'll never know, but I understand this now. Silence isn't always complicity. Sometimes it's mercy. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's the only thing someone has left. Everyone in that family died without knowing what I knew. Everyone except me. And now, after decades of carrying their truth alone, I finally understand something Eleanor never said but always meant. Some secrets live longer than the people who create them. Some truths take a lifetime to surface, and when they finally do, they set you free.